hour, Russia has suggested that BRICS countries should drop the US dollar in favour of national currencies when trading between the Bloc. The group of 5 emerging economies includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, as well as South Africa. Its industry ministers met this week via a video conference. I'm joined now by SABC correspondent in Moscow, Lucy Taylor. Very good evening to you, Lucy. Thanks indeed for your time. So let's talk about first what was discussed during that video conference.
Well, this is Russia trying to challenge the control of the financial markets by the United States. These 5 countries, as you said, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, are the BRICS group. And they were set up more than 10 years ago now as a bloc to try to challenge some of the power and control they perceived the United States and European countries to have over the world, including over the financial systems. And there's a way to step out from under those countries and start to work together to do that. And one of the things that they've been criticised over the years for perhaps not working together and not doing as much as many people thought they would or hoped they would when they were first set up. But one of the things they have done is set up this new development bank, a bank between the 5 countries and open to others as well. You might remember that South Africa, it approved a $1 billion loan to South Africa in June to help with some of the socio-economic effects of the pandemic, for example. And Russia is suggesting that this bank can be used as a way to encourage more non-dollar payments. So effectively, when you're trading with another country, to invoice that country in rand or in rupees or in rubles rather than in dollars, as a way to lessen dependence on the US dollar. And Russia's saying it wants these 5 countries to do that a lot more.
Well, Lucy, this isn't a new idea. Why do you think Russia particularly is keen on pushing it now?
Well, Russia has been pushing this idea for years now, and it's partly for economic reasons. It wants to lessen its own dependence on the US dollar, lessen the risk of having that kind of dependence on the dollar. But it's also for political reasons, because Russia believes that the United States uses its position at the heart of the global financial system to further its own interests, taking control of the IMF, for example. And in Russia's case, Russia's concerned particularly about the possibility of the US imposing sanctions on Russia, as it has many times over the last few years. And it's no coincidence that Russia is trying to move away from this reliance on the dollar at a time of worsening relations with the United States and Europe. Since 2014, for example, when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, and big sanctions were put on, freezing financial assets, freezing transactions. And in 2018, for example, after the Salisbury poisoning, when many countries around the world imposed sanctions on Russia as well. So that's one of the political reasons behind this. It says that its own share of the dollar in its own transactions has fallen to 50% over the last few years. The ruble share of that is about 14%. So it is doing it itself, and it has previously suggested other ways to move away from the dollar as well. So, for example, bringing in a new payment system to challenge the SWIFT payment system. If you've ever transferred money to another country, it wants the BRICS countries to have their own version of that. And the BRICS countries have also suggested, for example, using a cryptocurrency as an alternative to the dollar as well.
And are there any downsides for South Africa in moving away from the dollar?
Well, I think the biggest advantages for these BRICS countries, the most obvious advantages are for Russia, avoiding sanctions, as I said, and then also perhaps for China. A huge economy, growing very fast, and yet not really given the same voting rights in the global financial system, the same power over the financial system that the United States has historically had. So China also very keen to move towards national currency payments for that reason. For South Africa, though, for countries that have greater imports than exports, it could be more of a risk to use national currencies rather than the dollar. And the other question is the amount of trade. Apart from China, the amount of trade that South Africa has with other BRICS countries is rather small in comparison to the rest of the world. And so it may be that however much South Africa and the BRICS countries want to move away from dollar payments, it might be a while before the rest of the world gets on board with that idea.
Lucy Taylor, thank you very much indeed for your time. SABC correspondent in Moscow. Lucy Taylor, thanks.